Good evening, everyone. We are here at Making Connections at Opera America, How to Be a Teaching Artist. We're in intimate groups tonight, that's okay. One-on-one time is a good thing. And I sincerely thank all of you for being here, as I do our panel. So without further delay, some people just got here, I will turn it over to Amy.
Good evening, everyone. Evidently, I'm the moderator for the evening. Very happy to be here. I think it would probably be best just for us to introduce ourselves. You all have our bios, but just for each of us to tell you a little bit about ourselves and how we came to this field, and talk about our experiences, and then I'll answer some of your questions. Before we get started, I'm just curious, how many of you are coming into the teaching artist field for the first time, know nothing about it? And some of you, Tyler, had a little experience with it. Okay, great. So Camille, why don't we start with you?
Hi. I'm Camille Zamora. I'm an opera singer and soprano, and came to New York about 15 years ago from my home in Texas, and went to Juilliard and got a couple of degrees in performance, and have been lucky to sort of pretty much be working in the field most of the last decade or so. I think I sort of came to this kind of work, teaching artistry, but even more so just community artistry, through an interest in social justice applications of our art form. And I think we know, all of us, that opera isn't exactly the first thing you think of when you think of social justice. Although ironically, this repertoire was written by rabble-rousers, and it was, it is very charged with truths about justice and about equality. But I think one of the things that I'm excited about in this kind of work is applying these great classics of Mozart and these classics of the repertoire that we sing as opera singers in unexpected settings, and making it more radically accessible than the traditional profession generally allows it to be. So I'm the co-founding director of an organization called Sing for Hope, and we do radical arts accessibility. We bring volunteer artists to schools and hospitals, and we do things like put the pianos on the streets in New York in the summertime, just to say that art is available for everyone. So that's me.
Does anybody play the piano on the street?
Oh, I'm so glad.
Yeah, no,
I'm so glad.
My name is Neil Ginsberg. I'm very sick. My daughter has started preschool, so of course it's a whole germ exploration. And I'm a composer and a music educator, and this summer I actually did some work with Opera America with their Music Towards Opera program, which was a teacher training program about how to implement opera and create opera in classrooms, general classrooms and music classrooms. Right now I teach high school music at the Essex Street Academy High School, which is a public high school in New York City, and in the Lower East Side. And I write theater music and also choral music, which is published with several publishers, mostly for the school market, education.
Great. And so I'm Tom Cavanis, and I'm not sick, but I still sound like this. And I actually got into teaching artistry many, many years ago in a completely mercenary way. I just needed work. I needed money. And so I got into it for that reason, but then stayed because the work itself was so interesting. And I began to realize that many of the, the interactions that I had with students and teachers and in community settings was some of the most interesting and authentic interactions I was having anywhere. Even sort of compared to I was doing 8 shows a week out in regional theaters, and that was interesting too. But I realized more and more that I sort of was gravitating to wanting to make sure that I had teaching artistry at least as part of the mix of my life. And so now I'm doing lots of different things in teaching artistry, working with Camille in the Musical Connections program at Carnegie Hall, and so doing work in community settings in hospitals and in correctional facilities and homeless shelters, and that work is very rewarding. But I'm also working with Amy on a program that works with 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, so I'm keeping my foot in classrooms and in schools. I guess now I just feel like it's always got to be a part of what I do to be a teaching artist.
And I'm Amy Kirkland. Like Tom, I think I started in the field to make some money. I was singing with regional opera companies and musical theater companies and doing shows at night, like probably some of you are doing, and started teaching during the day to pay bills. And I grew up in a family of teachers, so it was not foreign to me to work with schools, but had an opportunity. Someone said, hey, we have this new teaching artist thing going on. Are you interested? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And really, from day one, fell in love with it. And for a while, was balancing both worlds of performing and teaching and really loving that. Over the last 8 years, I found myself deeper and deeper into the teaching artist world, but from an administrative perspective. So now I'm at the Weill Music Institute at Carnegie Hall, managing elementary school programs and school partnerships. I found through my work as a teaching artist that I really loved working with teachers, with administrators, and in writing curriculum, and have been able to kind of merge that in my current work. But still love to have my hands in the classroom from time to time, and that's the great thing about the teaching artist field, I think, is there are so many ways and opportunities to be an arts educator, and we'll talk about some of this tonight. I'm just curious from you guys what your definition of a teaching artist is. Anybody want to tackle it?
I think the lines are sort of happily blurred for a teaching artist. You never think of yourself as just a teacher or just an artist, or even the subcategories of all those things that whatever hat you happen to be wearing at the time. So I think that's probably a safe definition of a teaching artist, and I think also that the teaching artist isn't temporary. There's a term to it, whereas I think a teacher or an artist is it's hard to put any sort of boundaries on.
Yeah, I think there's a connotation of a residency,
Right.
in a sense. A lot of
Project or
sort of a visiting artist
Right.
kind of connotation.
Yeah, I like to also embrace a kind of a Catholic with a small c. Like, if you say that you teach and you're an artist, then you're a teaching artist. And I think we brought a copy of a book that if you don't know about, you should.
It's
Which
the Bible, that's what it's called.
Yeah.
The Music Teaching Artist Bible by Eric Booth, Becoming a Virtuoso Educator. It's Oxford University Press, and it's definitely worth reading. And he says exactly what Neil says. He agrees with what Neil's prognosis is for the definition, which is just that there aren't any consensus definitions really in the field, and that's probably healthy. That's probably a good thing. But
This is from Eric in here, and he does say what you just said, that a teaching artist often is something you profess. You say, I'm a teaching artist, you're a teaching artist. Which, if any of you know Eric, he's big on the meanings of words, and I thought this was really interesting that the term profession actually comes from when you profess a vocation. It doesn't necessarily mean you have a degree in it or that you went through some big certificate program. But his definition here is an artist who chooses to include artfully educating others in their work. So I think, based on that definition that we've all just said, that teaching artist work can happen in a lot of different ways, and I know you guys have done that in a lot of different ways. Tom, do you want to talk about, in a little more detail, about the breadth of work that you do as a teaching artist?
Sure. Well, I started with the Lincoln Center Institute back in the mid-'80s, and I was doing those gigs because they were containable. They were, you could just do a little bit of work and then you could run out of town and do a theater gig or whatever and then come back in. And so it was out of convenience to begin with. But that put me into all different kinds of settings. So I was working with, pre-kindergartners all the way up to, seniors in high school and even some higher education through that work. But eventually, I got a little bored with the short-term kind of work. And so as I was talking to administrators and people in the field, they would begin to ask me, they'd come in and observe, and that's one of the nice things about the arts education field, is that there's actually a lot of cross-observation and a lot of camaraderie and collegiality in the field in that way, and we have people like Amy who will come in to observe us from a managerial point of view too, where in the world of education, cross-observation isn't necessarily so common. But we have a lot of that, and so people would come in and watch me teach, and then they'd say, well, so where do you think this program should go next? And that sort of led me into more kind of program development and thinking about what else was possible, and into long-term partnerships. And so I actually worked at a public school, PS 199, which is up on West 70th Street between Amsterdam and West End. I worked there for about close to 10 years as the teaching artist for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade kids. They all learned how to play the recorder, they went to hear concerts at the New York Philharmonic, and they made up pieces. They created music all the time, and I was sort of their composer TA. So I've done that kind of work, and then also work leading and facilitating songwriting workshops, because I love songwriting as a composer. It's one of the things I love to do, and I love to help other people write their songs, especially those who might be non-musicians. Those who don't have formal musical training, but still have a song, in their heart, as they say. And so I've been doing a lot of that kind of work recently, and also helping to develop large-scale projects. Because I'd say, one of the things that definitely characterizes my work as a teaching artist is that since I've gotten the ear of a lot of big cultural institutions, as I've worked at the Philharmonic and at Philadelphia Orchestra and now Carnegie Hall, it's a mission of mine to try to get teaching artistry to center stage. I don't want it to just be an outreach thing or a thing that they do on the side or something to justify what else goes on. I want the work that we do in arts education to live right in smack in the middle of what they're doing. Sometimes, in kind of interestingly uncomfortable and subversive ways. And so that's a real big mission of mine, along with kind of trying to generate musical creativity and to make that accessible to people who might not usually have it. And I guess the third thing I would say is that what's characterizing my work now is this desire to offer musical experiences to those who are really and truly in the greatest need. And I still go back every year to the 5th grade classes at PS 199 and do a musical project with them. It's right around the corner from where Peter works, so he knows the school. But I go back every year and work on a project with them. So I continue that work, but I don't know. I mean, if you want to talk about what you do too, Neil, but that's sort of where I'm at the moment.
Yeah, I feel like teaching artists are called upon to either embellish something that's already there in some way, cross-curricular or within a sort of art discipline, or just create something completely new where there is nothing, where there's an empty space. So you kind of have to be ready to do what you're called on to do. If they're developing a musical about the history topic that they're learning in 4th grade about the Great Canal, you have to be sort of ready to step in and work with that.
Yeah.
But if they say our music program got cut, we have these 3 periods a week that we need someone to come, you have to be ready to just create something from nothing too. So, I mean, I feel like I've run the gamut of everything. I feel like there's nothing that they can throw at me that would sort of faze me, at this point. It's the range of need and work that's going on. I think is only growing, it's only growing, and the opportunities that that's only growing too. So, I don't know. I think there's a variety of work for teaching artists that a traditional music teacher can't enjoy. Right? A traditional music teacher is going to be called on to conduct a high school chorus or run the recorder program of the 3rd and 4th grade, or something that's sort of already set and the schedule is set. And I think that if you're a hip-hop artist or whatever you are, there's a place for you in a school somewhere or in an organization somewhere. I mean, that to me, that's the most interesting thing about being a teaching artist. I feel it's so purely creative, right?
Totally. I think too, I mean, one of the great things about teaching artist work is that you do get to be this kind of bridger of multiple worlds, that you're not just a teacher in that school day in and day out, which are, you know, incredibly valuable roles. But you're not just in performing world either, that you are bridging those two worlds, that you're bringing in a perspective to a school or to a community setting that gives a little bit of something different, of something creative. And part of that too is, you know, using your improvisational skills to do whatever is called on in the moment. And part of that, I think, lends it, being able to do that in the teaching artist world is about building relationships too, which I think is really exciting part of this work. Is that we do get to bridge worlds, we get to build relationships with people by doing sometimes the unexpected that you may not have imagined yourself going in and doing. And I've always found that, I think the thing that's so exciting about this field is it constantly challenges me, that I'm not just doing the same thing every day, that I'm constantly being challenged to come up with a new idea or a new way of doing something, a new way of communicating with somebody. What about you?
Well, it's funny. I mean, true confessions. I have to say, I don't know that I've ever really worked in a classroom per se. In that sense, I'm sort of the furthest. I'm sort of an odd version
So
of.
they came to you.
Well, actually, not even really. What I've done in my professional life is I've worked a lot as an opera singer and done a lot of outreach programs of opera programs, and that has informed the organization that I've had. My best friend, Sing for Hope. Long story short, what we found is both of us working a lot as singers. Frankly, most arts organizations now have outreach tagged into contracts and tagged into their general offerings. It's a great way to get grant money. It's what we all know should be happening. But one of the things that we found was, frankly, when you go and you're under contract, as probably a lot of you know, with LA Opera or whatever, and you go and do the quote-unquote outreach program, frankly, a lot of times those outreach programs are the furthest thing from empowering for those communities, because they're this beautiful blinded flash of light against a canvas of no actual arts education in the classroom. And there's just not a line that connects those 2 points. And so one of the things that I sort of grew up with a bit of being my bonded about this anyways, because my parents were in the Peace Corps, and I sort of grew up with this idea that yes, you work for social justice, you work to create change, hopefully, in the world around you. And yet my voice and my sort of aesthetic passion always really kind of went to very, very traditional operatic forms. And in this country, a lot of times that's presented in quite traditional ways. And I don't know if you guys have seen this big Associated Press article. It's actually on the homepage today of Opera America. Have you guys seen this article? I printed it out. It's pretty interesting. It's about the title of the article from the Associated Press is "Arts Funding Doesn't Show Diversity," and the opening sentence is that billions of dollars in arts funding is serving a mostly wealthy white audience that is shrinking, while only a small chunk of money goes to emerging arts groups that serve poorer communities that are more ethnically diverse, according to a report being released Monday. So, long story short, I think for those of us who are interested in social change, which I think is most of us who are awake, we have sorry, not to put a judgment on
No, go for it. You go for it. We're with you.
But, I'm sorry about that. But, I think for me, one of the big question marks in my life is how do I reconcile these things? How do I reconcile the fact that my voice goes I sound ridiculous if I try to sing hip-hop relevant, popular art forms. It's just my voice never I sound like Julie Andrews trying to sing hip-hop. It's bad. But I sound really right when I sing Mozart and when I sing, Handel. And so I also feel that art is really visceral and it's really shamanistic and it has incredibly relevant things to say to urban outsiders. And so for me, the joys of this kind of work has been to say, look, we know that educational inequality in this country is one of the civil rights issues of our time. And so to be able to bring this, high, fine art out of our turf, out of our terms, into a different and unexpected community is such a treat. I have to say, just on a selfish level, for me, some of my most joyful performances have been not necessarily on operatic stages, but have been singing that repertoire at the highest level with amazing colleagues, but in different kinds of venues, and definitely the classroom is that kind of venue. So for me, I think what's been fascinating for me about being in this Carnegie Hall program has been that I get to sort of hear and have defined for me some of these sort of best practices in the field of teaching artistry. And it's interesting, we got to hear Luke speak last year, and one of the things that he said that just really resonated with me is, in a way, it's about redefining our value proposition as artists. We're here because we believe in the power of this art form, and probably here in this room because we believe in opera. And so in a world where things are changing and where these traditional arts companies maybe aren't having the sort of reach that they should be, how can we maybe reframe this same wonderful art form but in different ways? And so to me, teaching artistry is the key, because obviously it starts at age 2 or age 0. It's at those earliest stages that we really can invite people in and make this rapidly accessible. And I think, God willing, we're starting to really see this current, and what it's going to mean is, of course, that we do have continued audiences, and all of those things that these opera companies are wanting to see happen. So.
And I think, I have a similar experience to you in that I was singing and doing these outreach programs and feeling that in some ways there was this air of these people need reaching out to. So we're going to reach out to them. Yeah. We're going to give them what we know they need.
Yes.
And I'm seeing a real movement in the last few years, and particularly with the work I'm doing now, that it is about the partnership, not what we need to give to you, but what can we make and build together. And I think that's what's really exciting is what questions do I have? What questions do you have? What questions do our kids have, or the people that we're serving? What are things they want to explore, and how can we build something together that is artistic, that's educational, that comes together and creates something new, which is what art is all about. So,
and definitely that cliche of that you are the recipient ultimately of that gift. I mean, I have to say it's a wonderful selfish pleasure for me in doing this work. It reinvigorates my traditional performing life, and I think that's been the great joy is these collaborations with these community members who aren't necessarily the people who would have ended up buying the season tickets, and it's a joy.
So, I want to hear a little bit more about what you have been working on lately. I know you're doing some work with the Music Words Opera.
Yeah, Music Words Opera is a curriculum designed to work on a few levels. One level is a create and produce, which is the subject that I was involved with over the summer. So classroom teachers and music teachers would come and take a workshop on a particular opera that the local opera company was producing. So we were in Atlanta, and Atlanta was doing Aida in their season. So teachers came to take a workshop, and they would learn about Aida and learn about how to ways to teach Aida and how to bridge it into language arts curriculum and literature curriculum and history curriculum, and they learn about that, and also conventions of opera. And then the second half of the workshop was create and produce an original opera based on. We based ours on the historical event, the Trail of Tears, which was the Andrew Jackson era Cherokee tribe, which I remember it was. Cherokee tribe, banned from cast out of Georgia into Oklahoma. It was this horrible Holocaust, basically. They sort of died along the way in the winter, and they, a terrible sort of Native American story, very famous, especially for people in Georgia who have all kinds of connections and interesting sort of guilt about it. This then years later. So we would learn about how to create an opera based on a meaningful idea, and how to write songs, and how to write lyrics, and how to create plot and characters and staging. And we there were 25 teachers. There were school librarians, there were music teachers, there were elementary school teachers. There's a range of skills. We created a 25-minute opera in 5 days, staged, with scripts, but staged, characters, part, duet, aria, chorus, counterpoint, recitative, which is added at the very end. Yes, basically, if you just sing while I play this chord, it would be recitative. Check it off of the list, which is probably what half of the recitatives were, or should be. You imagine improvising a recitative at a professional at the Met, just to say, just play a chord and I'll just say something. Right, it's supposed to do that. So that's the kind of work, you know, and you talk about relationships, so now these teachers have a relationship with the opera company because they're going to do this work on idea with their students, and they're going to do this create and produce, so the kids will actually hands-on learn about creating opera and what it takes to put an opera on, and they'll learn all this stuff about the opera and about Verdi, and then they'll go see it at their opera company in Atlanta, which they're so proud of because it's a local, you know, it's all fit by local.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of relationships, and at the best case scenario, you know, a member of the opera company will also be a teaching artist with the class, and then they'll see their teaching artist in AIDA after they've learned about whatever it is that they learned about. So yeah, when it all comes together, it's quite a progressive and extraordinary thing. And you know, I was fascinated by how well it works with so many different kinds of teachers. Like I felt like, okay, well the music teachers, like they'll get it immediately, like they know what it is. But there was one of the librarians had a master's degree in like Jacksonian. She wrote like an aria for Andrew Jackson to say like the connections that were made with opera as the medium, I guess is what it was, and they were all able to sort of get at it in different ways. It's quite rewarding, but also sort of exciting too to see it sort of come to life in that way. So that was a teacher workshop, which MWO, World Music Opera, is a teacher workshop. And the book is coming out from GIA, called World Music Opera with exclamation point after it. So you can see it. There's a middle school one, an elementary school one, and an upper level one with 3 different operas and materials and stuff like that. Well, I mean, I think we're going to talk to people who want to sort of get into this. It might be a good way to get a foot in the door. So I already have this curriculum, this published thing. I'm going to do this with your kids. And
I know one of the questions that often comes up around teaching artistry is, what does that mean for a job? And you know, we've all talked about some of our experiences as teaching artists, but I'm wondering if anybody wants to share kind of a day in the life of a teaching artist.
Oh, a day in the life of a teaching artist?
Yeah. What do you think, Tom?
Well, I mean, for me, because I am trying to practice both of those things, right? It depends on the day. But for instance, you know, I'm currently working on a cantata. So this morning I spent about 2.5 hours in the morning working on that cantata. I then got on my bike and did a spin around Central Park and started to prepare for the 3 different events that I had going on today. Camille and I were in a professional development workshop at Carnegie Hall around the facilitation of songwriting and how you do that, which I was in charge of designing, so I had mostly done it, but had to do some last-minute preparation. So I spent a little time doing that, and got ready for a rehearsal with the Young People's Chorus of New York City because I'm hosting a concert with them. So I practiced my lines for a 5:30 rehearsal, and tried to get my head around tonight and talking to you guys. So I spent a couple hours doing that, and the rest of the day kind of tumbles on. But for me, it's always a mix, and every day is different, and the calendaring is intense because of the the different teaching responsibilities and things that I
Yeah.
have mixed in with doing, with doing my composing. But and there are days when it's just too busy. I can't get a note on a page for sure. But I try every day. I try.
I'm curious, the three of you guys, have you studied pedagogy or educational theory, or would you say a lot of your learning to be a teaching artist has been organic and kind of in the field?
Well, I'm a public school teacher right now, so I have
So you have a master's.
I have my credentials.
Gotcha.
That and 250 will get you right. So. Yeah, so I have my stamp, and it's interesting because I do think about like things that I do in the class. Like, did I learn this for like the loans that I'm still paying off? That training is this, or did I just get this sort of out on the street, like in the field? Or hard to say. But yeah, I think the pedagogy is good.
Yeah.
I think it forces you to organize your creative impulses
Yes. Yes.
in a way that's is useful, and the kids pick up on that. I think the kids pick up on, okay, this person has a plan that's
Yes.
leading, like they're not just really cool who can play the piano and sit and sing, like this person has a plan and taking this somewhere. Leonard Bernstein did not have this teaching degree, you know what I mean, but he sure could structure a plan.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I have no training in educational work at all, except that which I've picked up on the job, and from professional development from the organizations with whom and for whom I have worked. And that actually, has been rather substantial. In other words, since then, I have read Piaget, and I have studied Erik Erikson, and I have learned about prior knowledge and experience, and I have been required to submit plans and to be really thoughtful about the assessment and evaluation of my work, and things that are pretty rigorous in a way. But I never had a formal training.
The credential, just from a practical standpoint, and maybe you could correct me, but the credential, you cannot be alone in the room. My understanding is you cannot be alone in the room with the students without your...
You need to have a licensed teacher. You need a license.
Right.
That's correct.
I'm not sure if that's a significant distinction. I'm not sure if it's true, actually. But
No, it's true. It's legal. It's legal, and I for one count on it.
Yeah.
I want a teacher here. I don't know. So I count on it. It's good for me. It's good for me.
And I kind of had a mixture of both of your experiences. As I said, I grew up in a family of teachers, so I felt like I was a trained teacher by default. But I started working as a teaching artist, and I actually took up substitute teaching for a while. Partly because I needed a gig, and partly because I was really interested in learning about pedagogy, and there's no better way to learn by fire than being thrown into it. And I found myself teaching 9th grade algebra for almost a year, a full school year. They call it a long-term substitute. But and at the time I was
thinking, you're doing fine.
Right. We don't want to pay someone else to do that. And in the moment I thought, what the heck am I doing here? Like, I'm an artist. I'm this, and I was still doing shows at night, having this crazy schedule. But I would not change that experience for anything. And it was a very unique experience. You most certainly don't have to go teach algebra to be a teaching artist. But learning the discipline of the classroom to understand the world that teachers go through was invaluable for me. And so after that experience, I moved to New York and did my master's in educational theater. I did the theater part because I'd already done the music degree, and I thought, well, I'll add to that. But I really wanted the pedagogy, and I didn't get certified, but I took the classes in child development, and it was just a personal interest of mine. And it's even taking those classes spurred me on to want to learn more, as Tom said, to read books or. So it was a little bit of a different pathway, and I think we probably all ended up in somewhat of the same place, but taking very different paths to get there. So, speaking of that, I wanted to to touch on the issue of certification, because it's been a hot topic lately. I don't know if you guys have read about it, but the field of teaching artistry is becoming more of a field, and there's been a lot of questions of, do I need to be certified? If I want to be certified, what's out there? And I was wondering what you all's take is.
It seems like you can get certification in a particular, you can get a Kodai certificate. You can take a 5-week training in ORF, technique and have your certification to do that. It's very field specific, very skill specific. There seems to be a lot of that popping up. I'm not sure what the value of it is. That I don't know. Are you more hireable, or is that something that principals sort of, what it means to them? I don't know. But there does seem to be, even though World Music Opera has is moving towards that. Like you take all 3 levels of it, then you get your. Sometimes the certificate is literally just a piece of paper with it's not a face on it.
A stamp.
You're right. So I don't know if that's your experience as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of still in the kind of the teaching artist as subversive act kind of mindset. And so for me, there is talk in the field and bubbling up of the possibility of different kinds of certification. And I know that in certain states they are experimenting with it and so on. But I mean, I'm not searching. I'm not looking for certification, and if it comes up, I'm not particularly interested.
What are the implications of being certified?
Yeah, I mean, it could make it more hireable. There could be a time where it's required. In other words, in order to work in the classroom, as we're saying with the licenses, that they may eventually say you have to have some kind of certification in order to be in the classroom. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet. And I'm an old man, so I figure by the time they figure that out, I'll be done. I'm long in the tooth for this work. So.
Well, and I think, as someone who hires teaching artists, I get that question a lot. What do you need from me? And I think, as Tom mentioned earlier, I think the great thing about teaching artistry is this blend of 2 worlds of wanting to bring something unique to the table to educate, if you will, but to really bring an artistry to it as well. And so as someone who hires a teaching artist, if someone has a certificate, I might go, oh, let me hear a little bit more about that. Because I think where the certificate comes from, is just as much of an issue as what's your work history or what are you really good at. That I look for artists who are genuinely interested in education, who want to do that kind of work, but that are fantastic artists and who value and continue to hone those skills. I've worked with some artists before who said, oh, I don't practice anymore, I'm just a teaching artist. And I go, wait a minute.
What is that?
Let's rethink this, because a really fantastic teaching artist is someone who's constantly working on their craft as much as they are working on what they're teaching. And there is a new certificate program actually offered out of Philadelphia. It's a new partnership with Philadelphia University of the Arts and Philadelphia Arts Partnership program.
Yeah,
and it's kind of in its experimental phase. We actually have someone from Carnegie that's going down to their monthly meetings to find out what's going on. And we'll see what happens with it.
I would say if there's one skill that you need to have, in my opinion, as a teaching artist, and I think it's for great teachers of any stripe, and that is the ability to take an idea or an insight and actually convert it into an artistic problem for others to solve. If you can do that, if you can actually, go from the 4th grade, you were saying, the kind of the history connection or whatever it is, and if you can figure out how to take whatever idea it is that somebody wants to work on or work with, and if you can convert it into a really great, juicy, creative, artistic problem that other people want to solve and want to get engaged in and want to do, then you can take that to the bank as a teaching artist. You can take that anywhere. You can take that as a teacher.
It's in the past couple of years I've taught in some very challenging schools, which is a whole other story I taught at a charter school. I mean, and when you are not a teacher, but when you are this art, God, only I can think of a new last line for this song that I'm writing. And you're like, well, you know what I mean? And you just go, like, it's transformative to kids. Like they don't even know what to do. Like they're not getting yelled at. They're not being told like what. Not that all the stuff that they do in school it doesn't have value, but it's when you can be perceived, and it's what a teaching artist has a tremendous advantage over a teacher because they know the teacher has all these responsibilities. You know, they know the story by second grade. They know like what the lay of the land is, and if you walk in with your like trombone or whatever, and you're like, I've got this thing that I'm trying to figure out, like you don't have any discipline problems. You don't have any sort of all of the issues that like are plaguing classroom teachers disappear. It's very, it never ceases to amaze me. You know, that when you can just focus in on that love of what you're doing, that passion about it, and like you said, I love the phrasing of it, this like artistic problem that you can somehow make conducive to theirs. This note, I can't get my mind. Like, you know, they're like even you guys are all like, you know what I mean? Like it pulls them in, and that's when you're a teaching artist. I think it's not about. I mean, it is about the skill and it is about the setting and everything else. But when your students think of you as some sort of collaborative guide, creative collaborative guide, yeah, you're rolling in it, and you're sort of like reveling in. It's just like, gotta put that in a bottle, you know, and just drop that.
And I think another luxury of being a teaching artist is we don't always walk into the room with assumptions of what people can or can't do. Sometimes we do, but you know, I know working with teachers, they have their list of good kids and bad kids. Kids who know the answers and kids who don't. And as an artist, when I walk into that classroom, I have no idea.
Right.
So I'm going to open up that creative process to anyone that's willing to take part in it. And, you know, it's just another way of bringing in a different perspective to that space.
I mean, I think we all, I'm sure, agree on the fact that art is the greatest stretcher of the imagination. And the first step to creating change is imagining change. You have to envision it to create it. I think one of the things that I'm fascinated by in this whole movement, this whole discussion, is how much of this can be quantified and systematized and scaled. And that's why that's why I'm so fascinated by the Carnegie Hall program. Eric was so lovely to point out the fact that, you know, of all the world's great brands, Carnegie Hall is one of the brands along with Coke that is recognizable year-round worldwide. And it makes sense that Carnegie Hall in our life would be the leader in this kind of work of teaching artistry. But what I'm just fascinated by is that organic thing that an artist brings to a classroom, which is this exciting problem that wants by that we all want to solve. How do you, I mean, I'm fascinated about how do you create a curriculum? How do you scale that? How do you define that and disseminate it? I mean, one of the reasons why I ask is I've read this statistic recently that apparently there are 450 different nonprofits working in teaching artistry in New York City public schools alone. And that's just something that's sort of interesting. It points to all sorts of really complicated questions about the proliferation of 501c3s in the first place, and tax code, and the fact that a lot of those dollars now are private dollars to 501c3s, and the educational system maybe could use the tax dollars. I mean, it's very, very complicated, but I just wonder, you know, how do we scale what is an improvisatory and organic process?
Performance outcome. You start ahead.
Okay.
And you go backwards.
And I say, thank God we got people looking at me thinking,
well, definitely somebody who's like putting a big picture in place and making and making sure that everything is possible. But if you don't have a performance outcome, which of course we know what it's going to be and how it's going to look and what is possible, but they don't. They just know that you're like slightly strange, you know, intense person who I'm calling by his first name. He's like driving me towards, you know what I mean, like driving me towards this end, and I'm just sort of trust him the way I trust people who interest me. I guess.
Exactly.
So I think that I think that performance outcome, it doesn't matter what the scale of it is, that's not the point.
Yeah.
But I think that's our test, that's our paper. And that's what
we want the quality to be high.
Yeah, we want that end, that like performance and applause and like, we did this, we made this.
And when we build our curriculum for school programs, we start with the repertoire. You know, this is the set of repertoire we're going to work on with kids. How they get there is part of the process that we explore with them, and it may be different in every school. Or we work with orchestras across the country too, and how they approach that repertoire may be slightly different. We give them suggestions, we give them a few pathways to try out, but we leave the process to the artists, to the teachers. We give them kind of this end goal, and I think that's part of it, is saying, even if you don't know what you're going to do at the end, sometimes I know you're going into settings and writing songs, so you don't have an end song, you don't have an end performance, but you have a goal. We're going to create something together. Now, let's back it up and figure out how we get there. So I know we're close to how much time do we have?
5:10.
Okay. I think I want to open it up to questions now for you guys. We've talked a lot. If you guys have questions for us.
One question I have, after say a project is done, the performance or whatever goal you've been working towards, is that usually it, or is there any kind of like follow-up afterwards, or is it usually just a one-off thing and the relationship is done until the next project starts?
No, honestly, it does. I mean, we have reflective sessions, we have assessment and evaluation. That's one of the nice things about schools do too. Obviously, they've got structures set up for all those things, for assessment and evaluation, and for continued understanding of the learning that's going on. But we do that in arts education as well. Sometimes there might be, a short-term project that kind of ends. But I would say that more and more the trend in the field is to make sure that there's appropriate reflective work, because Dewey said if you're not reflecting on your learning, you're not learning. Actually, and also. Frankly, all those 501c3 dollars that are put into that work, those people want to make sure that their money is being spent well and is accountable, and so they set people like Amy with the task of you got to make sure that Tom Cadmus is doing what he's supposed to be doing.
You write a 12-page report on what Tom did,
See,
and why it was useful.
So there is, I guess there are, you guys can comment too, but there's a bunch of that. That's the movement of the field, is in fact to do more of that sort of reflective work.
And you're involved in that reflective process. It's not just the teacher saying, will that work? Or did that work? Will we ever bring teaching artists?
That's right. No, we come back.
Okay.
We come back and we process, we deconstruct, we, in a lot of instances.
Yeah.
Not always, but yeah.
That when I first got to myself, but when I first came to New York and started being a teaching artist, that was not unheard of, but people would sort of look at you with sort of askance, why would you go back? Did your show was great? Everybody left it why are you going back? Why didn't you come back?
Yeah.
Sort of why are you here? So and I think it's a very good trend and important and valuable, but it's pretty recent. I think it shows the way this is sort of progressing and taking off and evolving. This legitimacy of teaching artists.
And I think too, we try to build that into our residencies or programs that we're doing as much as possible. When I'm scheduling an artist for a long-term residency, we always schedule a follow-up visit. But I think also in a lot of ways, social media and technology is allowing for us to follow up in ways that we couldn't before. We may have a one-off concert experience with a school, or we may do a 4-week project and then the artist is gone. But how can we use technology and social media to follow up in a way that, for example, we'll post a question up on Carnegie Hall website blog and ask teachers to contribute things you talked about with your kids after the concert. Things like that are, there's small ways of following up, but it's still following up without necessarily having to have that other in-person visit. And we're able to do that nationally too. You know, we work with a lot of, we don't necessarily send teaching artists out, but we have orchestras that send artists out, and so we have an online community where teachers can blog about their experiences. Artists can log on and ask their teachers a follow-up question even after their visits are done. So I think that is lending itself to some interesting ways of continuing the work beyond this physical space.
I have a question.
Oh,
You can
no,
first.
go ahead. I
Okay.
already asked one.
When it comes to schools that have deep problems, you know, whether it's test scores in core subject areas like math or English, you know, being much lower than grade level, or facilities issues, supplies, to basic things like attendance, you know, kids showing up to school, those kind of core issues that a school faces, where a principal might see something like this as a luxury. But I think for people in the room here don't see it as a luxury at all. They see it as kind of essential experiences as part of an education. How do you approach those conversations with people on the receiving end who might not see it as they see it as a good thing, but not an essential thing?
I mean, my experience, a lot of it is starting where people are. And you know, and that's actually how I started my teaching artist career. Was this opportunity that was given to me to teach was specifically through an arts integration program, because there were schools in this district where I was living that, you know, had cut music. We don't have money for it, but we still think it's important for our kids. However, we have, you know, we're a Title I school. We're failing in this, this, and this. How can you help us? Was the question that principals came and asked. You know, we have to get our math scores up. We have to do something else with literature, and the kill and drill, as we call it, is not working. So we're going to try something else. What can you do? But it was very challenging, because I remember going into one classroom in a theater capacity, and she said, our math scores are failing. This was 7th grade algebra. What can you do with theater? And it's such
There's a problem.
Yeah, that's a big problem. You know, it's not a natural marriage of artistic form. You know, you take theater into an English classroom and you can just go all day. But to a 7th grade algebra class, I was like, what am I supposed to do with these kids? But I started where they were. You know, I wasn't going to change her mind on, well, you need this elaborate music program and it will help your kids overall. You know, she wasn't going to go for that. So I did the best I could, and I came up with what I thought was a creative lesson. And after a 6-week residency, she was like, oh, our kids are really enjoying this. Maybe we'll use you more often in these other ways too, and it kind of grew from there. So I think it's starting where the schools are, helping them to meet a need that they have. And the same thing goes, I think, for community work as well. What's the need? What's the questions that are being asked? And what is something small that you can do to begin with? And then you can start to explore bigger ideas as you build that relationship. But I think building a relationship is so important in schools, particularly schools that are failing. They often have programs that have come in and left over, and, you know, including teachers that come for 6 months and then you're like, I'm out of here, I'm not going to deal with this. And so they get really tired of trying something new all the time. So if you start small and build those relationships, there's a trust that happens that then allows you to go to the next level.
You definitely want to set yourself up to succeed. I mean, all parties involved. You don't want to set yourself up to not do what you set out to do. I think that's sort of another way of looking at what he was saying. You know, so I think you want to be, are you envisioning you're going to approach principals and offer yourself as a teaching artist?
I hope so. I guess I'm open to anything. But
Yeah. Because a lot of times the principals are seeking, they'll go to an organization seeking, we lost our music program, we really want to give the kids an opportunity after school, before school. Like there's ways that principals get to be creative, you know what I mean? So I mean there's that way too, that them looking, you could just focus on the people who are looking for it rather than sort of trying to sell it to somebody who's not interested.
Yeah, I've been in schools too. You know, occasionally I've worked with programs where a school gets picked for something, and the principal and the teacher never wanted it to begin with, but they're kind of given it. And that's always really challenging. Talk about having to build a relationship. But often I think, you doing the work with those that really do want to invest the time with it, it can become contagious. Often in a school, we'll recommend to principals, let's start this work with teachers that volunteer. And it kind of grows from there. The other teachers go, wow, they're doing really fun things in that classroom down there. I want to join it.
But we have a history in this field of sometimes overclaiming, and so I think it should be good. We should be careful, right? If someone comes to you and says, "So, can you come and work at our school and make our literacy scores go up?" You can say, "Well, look, here's what we can do." Right? Start with what we actually can. What's reasonable for us to try to accomplish, and then and then we'll see. But not to over, promise in terms of attendance or, these kind of systemic problems, which arts education may have absolutely no control or no ability to even kind of impact, at least to begin with. And so I think it's important for us as teaching artists to say, well, here are the real outcomes that we could achieve together. And I think that's, I hear you saying, be reasonable, be real.
Right. You want to be like,
ambitious.
I'm going to pull rabbits out of hats. I'm going to do all these amazing things, but at the same time, right? You don't want to say like, this will be the next Broadway show. Like you will have no attendance problem. Right.
There will no longer be any crime in your neighborhood.
So I think that everyone, as dire as some situations are, everyone wants success. Everyone wants the same thing. You need to get very deep. It's true. So that's helpful.
Very helpful.
I have a question. Hi. I was a teaching artist for City Opera for several seasons, and again, one of those, where as a performer, it was one of the most invaluable personal experiences for me. Going into the inner city schools here, coming from the South, where we of course had music programs, and you just grew up and music was part of your education, and here, the pianos are bolted to the floor, if there is a piano. It was eye-opening for me. And so my question to you is, what would you suggest as far as coming out of the in-classroom teaching artist, wanting to maybe explore the possibilities of being someone who helps with the programming or the creation of policy or ideas for something like that? What would you suggest as far as someone wanting to kind of break into something like that? Administrative stuff. Yeah.
Right, or entrepreneur, to think of yourself really more as an entrepreneurial kind of teaching artist with the idea of,
consulting?
I don't know, maybe. But the idea of what are the projects that you could do? I mean, if that's what you're really, interested in.
Yeah, I'm just trying to sort of explore what the next chapter might be, and I valued my in-school experiences for sure, but I'm just trying to sort of figure out what the next step might be if I wanted to do something.
Oh, so you're really thinking more policy level?
I'm not really sure. I'm not just kind of was curious, since you all seem to have done the in-school stuff, but now are involved in other parts of it. Sort of, how did you make that next leap into the next? Not just doing the residency, but shaping what the actual program might be, or what you were offering. How did you get into that next thing?
I can say from just my experience, when I was at the 92nd Street Y, I was a teaching artist, and so the administrator there would ask me my opinion about what should happen programmatically, and the suggestions that I gave her sort of worked out. And so when she left the job, she ended up recommending me for it. So part of it is also just kind of letting those people that you're working with in the field know of your interests, kind of blurring those boundaries between being a teaching artist and doing other things. And I think, I guess the other thing is just that people like Amy, right, or like I have done in the past, we're always looking for the artists who are kind of the most vibrant and imaginative in terms of new ideas. So if you've got ideas about how the way things ought to be, part of it is also just finding ways to communicate that with those who are in positions of power. Frankly.
I mean, I kind of went straight from one to the other. I actually was in the South as well as a teaching artist. It's like I'm moving to New York and I'm putting in my resume at the Metropolitan Opera Guild. You know, and I started in an administrative level, you know, making the phone calls and filing a database, you know, because I was willing to do that. I knew I wanted to go into more of the administrative field, and then I kind of worked my way, you know, around different jobs within that. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the people that we hire at Carnegie Hall that start to move into that role start as our teaching artists. That, you know, we'll go visit them one day and we'll say, you know, if you ever need anybody to work on curriculum, give me a call. I'd love to explore that. And so I start to get these bugs in my ear of, oh yeah, so-and-so mentioned that they're really interested in mentoring teachers and working less with students. We actually need that right now. You know, that I get those kind of bugs in my ear, just either people tell me directly or, you know, through word of mouth. So.
And Camille, you really sort of started this organization, right?
A harebrained scheme. I don't know what they're thinking. I have to say, I mean, for us, it's been a double-edged sword. And when I say us, it's me and my dear best friend and partner in crime. We were best friends at Juilliard, and we just had this idea as we're sort of trying to scrappily launch our little soprano performance careers that we wished that there was a venue for volunteerism using our art form. And in both of our cases, we had, in really meaningful ways in our own lives, found ways to volunteer. In my case, my best friend had died of AIDS when we were in high school, and I go back every year to Houston to do this big AIDS benefit, and it had become this wonderful touchstone event in my life. In Monica's case, she had this weird point of entry because her father has done huge things in social justice. His name is Muhammad Yunus, and he invented microfinance. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for the creation of small loans to alleviate poverty. And so Monica had, you know, as she's pursuing this career as a soprano, she had this sort of odd look at this, you know, very high-level social justice world. And so in both of our cases, we thought, you know, there should be a way for artists to use their art form and plug right into volunteer service programs that would feel good. And so very naively, we found some people who helped us start a 501c3. 5 years after that, we now find ourselves with a staff of 5, and we have an office space, and we have over 800 artists who volunteer. And I would encourage all of you guys, if you're interested in doing this kind of work on a volunteer basis, please just sign up. You become part of a database that receives regular invitations to volunteer in schools and hospitals. But I have to say, the flip side of that coin is that it is a very crowded nonprofit marketplace. And what you don't want is to become bogged down in precisely the sort of unexciting parts of that. You want to be thinking, and you want to be able to sort of shape the way this work is done, even just in your own life. But what you don't want to do is be bogged down in the fundraising and the stapling of the papers. And that for us has been a great challenge, and why it's been a real pleasure for me just to go back to basics as a cog in a machine that runs so well with Carnegie Hall. I don't ever ask myself how anything is being paid for, or you know, are the lights on. That's the hard part about, you know, if you do start a 501c3, I mean, those become very big issues. It's just the fundraising and the gala and that sort of thing. But, you know, that said, I do think, you know, I think you guys have been on the head, you know, if you're interested in this kind of work, just flock, you know, find people who are doing it. There are wonderful ways to plug in, and it's such a, you have to say,
Yeah, I was going to say, same thing for being a teaching artist. In a way, like if you want to be a teaching artist, like just you got to raise your hand. You know, you got to raise your hand. Yeah, exactly. And you got to tell people that you want to do it. And there are opportunities out there. And, you know, I guess maybe I've heard of a couple people being shut out in one way or another, but it's very rare. If you want, it really is. It's pretty rare. If you want to do the work, and you let people know, and you're passionate about it, my guess is that pretty soon you'll be doing it.
Yeah.
Well, there are no more questions. Thank you, everybody, who's joining me in applause.
Yay,
Thank you. And we actually do have some wine and other refreshments if you'd like to stay for some continued conversation. Yeah.
Oh, and I did, if you guys are interested, I'll put these here for you to browse through. This is Eric Booth's book, The Teaching Artist, Music Teaching Artist Bible. Great book. And then also the Teaching Artist Journal. It's a great publication that's now online as well. Great articles about the field, articles submitted by people in the field of what they're doing and the work that's happening. So I'll put these here if you want to browse.
Oh, tight.
The Caribbean.
Yeah, I mean, I was still getting my degree at the time, so
That
I was making time to practice, but it really did actually cut into my practice time quite a bit. You know, so it's exactly finding that balance is really
actually it was funny when I started. Hi.
How is he doing?
Doing great.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it wasn't
That was like audio.
For music or film or? Yeah, well, hey. Okay, good. Wow. So where did you guys meet? We went to school together. At Hart, yeah. Very nice. And where are you from?
I'm from Virginia.
Virginia. Tom, I'm from South Carolina.
Hi, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
That's great.
Yeah, he's doing great. We're Historians now. We've been there for just right now. Because it was out of the village. That's where the community. We were trying to remember the last time we saw you. Right. And we moved. Yeah, and we then moved to it's right after that when we got married. So. We started to sing songs. No, it's really it's quite a journey. He was a buyer first.